and Columbus make the top 8 after a shaky day 1. Got his bearings, ran off quite a few wins with his 4-color soul deck, then won a PTQ a couple weeks later, so he'll be going to Brussels later this year. Congratulations there, and he's off to a nice start here. So he's certainly figured some things out, his return to Magic, and he's off to a nice start. His opponent playing Omnitel, a deck that's starting to pick up a little bit of popularity, and with the decline, presumably, of Pyroblast and Red Elemental Blast, this deck might be very well positioned.
I think so, and I think Chris's matchup here is really bad. His deck is all about beating decks that are playing to the board. Thopter Foundry plus Sword that make very good against decks that are trying to attack. He's got 4 main deck Source of Plowshares, a Supreme Verdict in his main deck. Not that much in the way of counterspells. I think at least game 1 he's going to have a really tough matchup here against a streamlined combo deck.
It's a Ponder to start things off here for Zach Wehrmeyer. And that will resolve. So we'll take a look at the top 3. And we'll see what he wants to do with them here momentarily. Omnitel becoming a more streamlined deck. Sometimes you see versions of this deck splashing red for Burning Wish. Sometimes you don't. Dig Through Time is a nice addition to this deck, though.
Yeah, definitely. It's easy for this deck to fill up his graveyard. Definitely in the market for selection 2 over raw card count.
Looks like Zach's going to shuffle with the Ponder. And Wehrmeyer will draw an island and simply pass the turn back over to Andersen, who draws a copy of Thoughtseize. That's a nice one here in this matchup.
Yeah, it's one of his few pieces of real disruption, though I think Chris may not have black mana just yet.
Well, that's what Brainstorm is for. 2 copies of Force Malone and Sensei's Divining Top. Didn't find the land, but 2 forces isn't bad. And he said, ugh, Brainstorm locked. It's actually rare that we see this happen.
Yeah, it's not that common. Only 19 lands in Christopher's list, though. He's running it a little late.
Sometimes you just want to skimp on lands, man. Here's a Sensei's Divining Top.
And here's another slow, excruciating way to try to get to land drop number 2.
Zach gonna cast a Brainstorm. So 3 cards coming. Of course, 2 will go back here momentarily.
So, you know, things are going pretty badly for Chris thus far, but if he's able to get to black mana for this Thoughtseize with the Force of Wills in his hands, he does have a chance. Part of the problem, though, is that he just has no pressure to back any of this up. And the combo decks in Legacy are powerful enough and redundant enough and play with enough search where just a couple counter spells is not enough to get the job done unless you're beating them down as well.
Yeah, the thing is, it's so important to have that combination of disruption plus pressure or some sort of reactive counterspell plus pressure to force your opponent's hand. And right now, Chris doesn't have that. I mean, Chris is still in just the market for a second land to even get this game going.
He'll have some looks at it with the top. I imagine he's going to top in his upkeep to try to find a black source of mana, draw the land, and then cast Thoughtseize. But there's not even a guarantee we get that far, as Zach's deck is definitely capable of killing very quickly.
Scalding Tarn was the draw. See, in Zach's hand, he does have a Brainstorm over there, a Cunning Wish, a Dream Halls.
Your pairings have been posted, or your seedings.
There is Flooded Strand.
Have been posted.
And Chris is going to spend his top on his upkeep. Underground Sea and Flooded Strand are among the cards he's found, so this problem has been solved as far as lands are concerned. Sort of the third card there. There is an Underground Sea. Perhaps it's time to fire off this Thoughtseize now. So the interesting thing is, I'm not entirely sure if Chris knows what he's up against, though this could help if this does resolve.
Has all the makings of a combo deck thus far. This many basics and not really casting anything. Usually these decks are trying to win in one turn.
There's a Brainstorm. That very quickly resolves, so Ponder among the cards drawn. Looks like an Enter the Infinite as well. A couple of cards have to go back here for Wehrmeyer in just a moment. Thoughtseize is going to net a couple of lands. Actually 4, that's quite a few. So he's done a nice job of hiding things here with the Brainstorm, Ponder, and Cunning Wish, the cards left over. And Cunning Wish is a real red flag.
Yeah, that means it's some sort of combo deck and most likely Omnitel.
Yeah.
It's a way to find combo pieces or a way to win the game once you already have your combo set up.
Yep. That's all it takes. And rarely do we see any decks in Legacy without Cunning Wish, or with Cunning Wish, excuse me. There's really only one at this point, which is Omnitel. I think I'm trying to kind of rack my brain for what else it could possibly be. This is really just about it.
High Tide.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Another Cunning Wish deck. But it's a short list. And they're all kind of the same deck.
Yeah. Chris will draw. Play a Flooded Strand and pass the turn back. So top and play along with 3 lands here for Andersen. He's worked his way out of the mana trouble. Still has 2 copies of Force of Will in hand. And looks like the necessary blue cards to remove. So he's got a nice reactive wall of cards in his hand to stop Zach from what he's doing, as Zach's going to play a Ponder. But now he's got to find a way to actually close this game out.
And it's really good news here for Chris that Zach's hand is so land heavy, you know? Doesn't have a lot of action to work with, so these counter spells are going to be really powerful.
Time to shuffle it away. Doesn't like what he sees.
And shuffling's a pretty bad sign here for Zach because with the 2 fetch lands in play, his ponders are going to be pretty powerful in general. Even if he doesn't like all 3 cards, you can take 1 or 2 and then shuffle away. So the fact that he found nothing that he likes, plus now he's just drawing random cards off the top of his deck, and he really needs to find as much action as possible because he's already flooding out. Chris is drawn out of his early mana troubles. It's maybe going to be tough sledding here for Zach.
Dream Halls has been picked up. He's going to have to find some sort of counter magic or something. Pack negation, something like that, as there's a Tarn. Chris going to spin his top. Again, just a 1-0 Sensei's Divining Top in his deck. So he looks at a couple of cards here. But even though he has a pretty decent stranglehold in this game from a permission standpoint, he's just still got to find a way to try to win the game. Like, I wouldn't be surprised here, as he has a Snapcaster Mage in his hand, of just, I guess Snapcaster plus Thoughtseize is a play that he'd be interested in, but just get some sort of clock out there.
Yeah, I like Snapcaster plus Thoughtseize a lot this turn. He's got a lot of counter spells to back it up, so he's unlikely to die. And yes, 2 damage a turn is not the fastest clock, but it's at least something.
Looks like Andersen's going to pass the turn back. Wehrmeyer's going to sacrifice at least 1 fetch land at this point. Get a basic island out of his deck. Again, Chris may think that he's up against High Tide in this matchup as opposed to Omnitel, but I agree with your assessment that both those decks do kind of just play the same.
Yes. Make my land drops, you know, improve my hand, and try to kill you in 1 turn.
Yeah.
The specifics are different between the 2 decks, of course, but they aren't the fastest combo decks typically.
Not at all.
Omnitel can get the occasional, you know, 2-mana land plus show and tell type of draw. It's uncommon. But generally looking to kill on turn 3 or turn 4, but with a lot of cantrips to help, a lot of counter spells along the way.
So Wehrmeyer taking the opportunity to just get a few lands out of his deck. Doesn't want to draw any more of those. Leaving 1 fetch land in play in case he does draw a Brainstorm, or he should shuffle away with a Ponder or what have you. Omniscience the draw. This deck can't cough up some interesting ones.
Yeah, that's the problem with Omnitel, is you do have some less than ideal draw steps. Though the same thing is true of Sneak and Show. Crystal Brands and Emrakul's and the things that cheat them into play. They're good when you have them together, but by themselves, they aren't really magic cards.
Well, if Chris didn't know what he was up against, I think he's going to find out right now, because it looks like Zach was thinking about playing Dream Halls. Not just yet, though, so we'll have to wait. As Andersen will take a look at a couple cards of Sensei's Divine Top, quickly resolve that, draw a copy of Thought Scour. Looks like he's going to cast a Thought Scour. This will turn over a couple of cards, Source of Plowshares and Sword of the Meek. That's where he'd rather have those cards. Picks up a copy of Brainstorm.
He's still just trying to sit on his wall of counter spells.
Yep. Has a discard of Spell Snare. Card that doesn't actually play much of a role in this matchup, so Again, not a bad card to discard.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if there's any. One copy of Impulse.
Boom, baby.
Bit of a throwback.
So will Zach try to give things a go now? And he thought about casting Dream Halls last turn, still not willing. But again, he's also not playing against an opponent who's really doing much of anything. So holding steady might not be so bad.
Yeah, I mean, Chris is now at the point here. He gets to cast a Baleful Strix. He gets to make a land drop, still hold up a Sea of Permission. Gets a little pressure going. He's starting to get to the point where he can, do something with the Snapcaster Mage if he wants to. Still leave up the counterspell.
Ancient Tomb, the draw.
Wow.
There's the tomb.
Zach is approaching hard casting Enter the Infinites territory.
He'll sacrifice that Flooded Strand. We are
It's a lot of mana.
You're not wrong.
You can already cast Omniscience. That's not even hard. He has mana left over.
That's easy. Look at where we are now.
The plan F of Omnitel. Show and Tell being the easiest, Dream Halls being the second route, and then just making my land drops, starting to cast some stuff.
Look, if you're not going to do anything, I'll go through this door. It's fine.
Some high-impact cards in Omnitel. Enter the Infinites, Omniscience.
Hey, all these cards have to be countered, too.
Yep.
For what it's worth. The Dream Halls, it can't resolve.
We see this out of Sneak and Show sometimes. We almost never see this out of Omnitel because the spells are so expensive.
Yeah.
But as you can tell, Chris's deck not really good at applying the beatdown so much.
I don't think the Baleful Strix likes to hear that.
Turn 7 Baleful Strix being his first bit of pressure.
Eric Rill walking with a match slip right now. So Cloud Vine looks like it was able to get the job done this round, as here is another copy of Dream Halls. Chris has to counter this one, too.
Just keep test spelling them,
Yeah.
Whatever.
Chris looking at 2 more copies of Force Will. There's also a counter spell in his hand. And blue cards, he's got plenty to remove. And I do like removing Brainstorm there, because now his hand is Forceful, Dig Through Time, and Counter Spell.
Yep, that's a great leftover there. You can go ahead and cast a Dig Through Time, probably find a blue card, or you can sit on the Dig Through Time. I think he still needs to find something going, because Zach's at 12, facing just a Baleful Strix. That's a lot of time to let him recover. And, as we've seen, the amount of mana that Zach has in place, he can just start doing threatening stuff that you normally don't see this deck able to do. Just test spelling with the awesome stuff that you try to cheat to play.
Chris going to spin his top here after sacrificing that Polluted Delta. Take a look at a couple of cards here. Among them, a Thopter Foundry. That can be the clock that gets things rolling.
Yep. He's got an artifact in play to grease the wheels already. A Sword in the Graveyard. He's got a good setup.
There's a Thopter Foundry. More importantly, he's got the necessary defense here, too. Counterspell that he can hard cast with this mana, as well as Force Will plus a blue card and Dig Through Time to remove. So 2 counterspells is backup.
Still, the volume of mana here that Zach has in play, he still might be able to push through this. And it's a funny thing about this, all the lands he has in play. If he was just trying to go off through Show and Tell or Dream Halls, I don't think he can push through all the counters. But because he has so much mana in play, he can just cast some things. He may be able to do it.
It's a preordained. Take a look at the top 2. Pact Negation among those cards. That's a way to work through a counterspell. Looks like 1 on top, 1 on bottom. Gonna draw the Pact. The mana count, always scary. Polluted Delta gonna come in. Zach gonna sacrifice that and go down to 10. Dealing himself a lot of damage here. Chris's clock isn't the fastest, obviously, but...
Well, it's gotten a lot faster now.
Yeah.
The Thopter Foundry is really the fastest thing his deck can do, which is part of the problem for him in the matchup. It's just hard for him to kill very quickly, but he can do it to the extent that he can do it. Here we go.
Chris just ready to cast counter spells. So what do we have here? Omniscience. Chris is going to sacrifice his Flooded Strand as fast as he can to get a blue producing land out of his deck so he can hard cast counterspell.
This has been a really comical game 1.
We've had some interesting games so far today.
I have not just seen like, yeah, I'll test spell with Omniscience. I haven't seen a lot of that over the course of my covering these tournaments.
Here's a pact negation to go after the counter spell. And now Force of Will will go after the Omniscience. Assuming that Chris said, okay, your pact negation resolves to make him tax his mana on his turn.
Yep.
And then you Force of Will the Omniscience, so the pact negation forces Zach to pay 5 mana on his turn. I think that's the important thing here. Zach with 2 cards left in hand.
Yeah, it's easy for players when they're moving too fast to go, yeah, I'll counter your counter spell.
Yes.
Nope. Actually, what you want to do is let the pack resolve and then try to counter again, so they're stuck with the pack trigger.
Chris going to get a little Strixie before passing the turn back. Wehrmeyer's down to 5. Now Zach, of course, does have to pay for the pact here, which does choke his mana a little bit, as his hand right now is Enter the Infinite and I believe a land. He draws a copy of Preordain. But I don't think there's a winning combination of cards here that he can find off this Preordain. I think that's the issue, because Preordain simply replaces itself. We'll find out as Chris is going to spin his top here in response.
I think he can still brainstorm. He can find brainstorm and brainstorm into the goods.
Brainstorm into the perfects?
Yeah, I think that's still available.
Well, Force of Will, Pact Negation are the cards he's looking at, so looks like those are going to have to go to the bottom very quickly. Take a mystery draw. That's another Pact Negation.
It's a small thing, but, you know, given that Zach was going to die this turn anyway, no matter what, he's either winning or dying, no matter what this turn.
Sure.
I think he would have been better served casting using the Ancient Tomb to pay for the Pact. So if he just happens to keep cantripping into cantrips, he's not choked on blue mana.
Sure.
The way that his mana got tapped that game, there's a sequence of draws where he preordains into a Ponder and then ponders into a Brainstorm and doesn't have enough blue mana to cast everything in one turn. It's unlikely to matter, but it's definitely above 0%.
It's a minor thing, but if it does matter, he's going to be pretty frustrated.
Exactly.
That's for sure, as he does concede that game. Chris Andersen going to win game number 1 here with his Thopter Founder deck. Up a game over Omnitells. We'll turn our attention towards Zach's sideboard, where you're going to find a lot of one-ofs due to Cunning Wish. There's also 3 copies of Defense Grid, but the Wish targets here: a Wipe Away, a Swan Song, a Flusterstorm, a Spell Pierce, a Trick Bind, a Pact Negation, an Echoing Truth, an Intuition, a Noxious Revival, a Firemind's Foresight, part of the win with this deck, along with Research Development, and then a Laboratory Maniac. So that little package of Research Development, Firemind's Foresight, Laboratory Maniac, all part of the puzzle. The question here is, does he want Defense Grid? My inclination is yes.
When you see actual factual counterspell in someone's deck, I think it's a good time to be bringing in Defense Grid. If he was just playing against 4 copies of Force of Will, I think you could say, well, you know, I don't think Defense Grid is worth it if I'm just playing against 4 copies of Force of Will. But Chris has other counterspells in his main deck. He's likely to have more of in his sideboard. I think it's worth bringing in.
Well, we will take a look at Chris's sideboard as well here very quickly.
A Humility, a Detention Sphere, a Surgical Extraction, a Baneslayer Angel, an Aethersworn Canonist, a Nile Spellbomb, 2 copies of Sensei's Divining Top, 3 copies of Counterbalance, 2 Enlightened Tutors, 1 Sable's Web, 1 copy of Seal Cleansing. So I think that I like the Counterbalance package in this matchup. There's just a lot of cantrips in Zach's deck. I think it's worth bringing in here. I don't mind the Canonist just having a little bit more pressure also, so this deck does try to chain together multiple spells in some turns sometimes. Besides that, I'm not a huge fan of a lot that's going on here.
Yeah, I don't know if either player needs to change very much. And, you know, in that particular game where Chris had some mana issues, you know, you can see Zach was a little frustrated with how the game went because he just got all of his spells countered, which I don't think oftentimes is going to be the case. You know, that's just how that one particular game broke, I think.
Yeah, 4 Force of Will, 2 Counterspell, and 2 copies of Spell Snare. As we mentioned before, not a lot of targets in Zach's deck, really just the Impulse. So a fortunate draw there for Chris, but when you keep a hand with 1 land, it's going to be chock full of spells. And the way that his deck is set up, he's able to, you know, Sensei's Divine Top and shuffle away his bad draws, or Thought Scour, Mental Note himself to not draw Swords to Plowshare. So he did have some control over his draw steps there, made sure he drew more of his substance.
Well, Counterspells allowed Chris to win that game, and Counterspells have allowed Patrick Chapin to win many games over the course of his career. I imagine he talks about those, as well as many other things, like perhaps a Fleecemane Lion, which helped him win Pro Tour Journey Nixon, the remastering of Next Level Magic.
Yep, the 2015 edition, and now available with new updates, new examples from Patrick Chapin, the innovator, Pro Tour champion, World's runner-up, and Hall of Famer. It's been out of paper book for nearly a year now, so if you're looking for a paperback copy, now's a great time to order. Also available on ebook, starcitygames.com/NLM to order your copy today.
Mr. Chapin has a Pro Tour right around the corner.
He does.
I'm interested to see what the innovator will innovate in the modern format that no longer has Treasure Crude, Birthing Pod, or Dig Through Time.
And it's a format, I think, that's become a lot more hospitable to Cryptic Command, which is a card that I know Patrick Chapin is quite passionate about.
Cryptic Command is, dude, it's been gone for a while. It needs to come back.
I think it's a matter of time. It's just too good of a Magic card in normal games. As long as people aren't dying too fast, it belongs.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that? I think Cryptic Command is a healthy card. Is it too good?
If the format's really, really fast, then it could be something that's going on and can be fine.
Okay.
Because it's actually a struggle to get to 4 mana and triple blue is a real deck building cost. If you put Cryptic Command in standard, it would be the best thing going on. Maybe the
No, you're right. No, you're right.
It would just be the best thing
No,
going
you're
on.
right. You're right. Because I'm thinking of like,
Kidding me?
okay, what decks would it go in?
Butcher of the Horde and Siege Rhino, those cards are not that exciting against Cryptic Command.
The blue-black,
Wingmate Rock. Oh, wow. Okay, I guess I'll counter it and draw a card.
the blue-black and blue-white control decks would be really good
Right.
if they had Cryptic Command.
Now, in Modern, you can die really, really fast. So
Yeah.
that's something that, is a choke point on how good Cryptic Command can be. But if the format's slowed down, could be time for a resurgence.
I'm thinking of Jim struggling with like his nullifies and
Yeah.
everything when we watch him play blue-white control. How much easier it would be if he just had 4 Cryptics in his deck?
What's the best card in all these blue control decks in Standard? Was it Dissolve?
Yeah.
Dissolve's the best card, right? Okay.
That like Dig Through Time.
Well, Cryptic Command's quite a bit better than Dissolve.
Just a smidge.
Smidge
Just
better.
a smidge.
You'd have to bias your mana base in certain ways. Maybe it would be harder to play Bile-Blight in your blue-black control deck. I don't know, but they would find a way to play with Cryptic Command.
Yes, load up with a couple more Ouroboros. Who even cares?
Yeah.
Looks like Zach's gonna take a mulligan here. So Cryptic Command was like the kind of card to me that was it was clearly very good, and it was like the proper amount of frustrating.
Well, the problem is Cryptic Command can be an okay card to very powerful card, assuming that everyone playing the games is a master. If you are not very good at Magic and you play against Cryptic Command, you have no shot at winning the game.
Yeah, you hate it too.
You have to play perfectly to work your way around that kind of card.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this is the way these things, competitive things work. Most people are not masters. They're just people who play Magic for fun. And Cryptic Command is really punishing on those players.
It was always a fun game to try to beat Cryptic Command when they had 4 mana up and when you're supposed to play your spell and how you're supposed to go about playing it.
I usually just declared combat, attacked, and then didn't cast a spell.
That's how things went with me most of the time too.
Yeah.
And then you run face 4 into a misbind click, so either way, you're kind of screwed.
The squeeze.
Yeah. That's the most painful squeeze too.
That deck was the deck of squeezes. Fairies was nothing but squeezes.
Yeah.
Oh, you're trying to play a bunch of cheese spells in one turn? I guess I'll spell Stutter Sprite you or
Here's a Ponder. Maybe that'll come back in Modern. Who even knows?
I'll just kill your creature, your cheap creature that you cast with a removal spell on tap with all my goods in play still.
Omniscience among the cards here for Zach.
A defense grid as well.
Looks like he has some interesting keeping defense grid. It looks like.
Well, he's already mulliganed, so the defense grid's cost has gone way up because he's, light on cards that facilitate the combo, but defense grid might be just too good to turn down.
Enlighten 2 the draw here for Chris. Zach will draw. Defense grid in hand. And he's going to try to see if this can resolve here.
And this is very good news for Zach because Chris led off with a black land and did not cast Duress or Thoughtseize.
Yeah.
So if Chris is on defensive cards right now, they're probably counter spells. It's likely you would have seen a discard spell on turn 1.
At least that's all that, Zach really saw in the first game.
Yep.
With all those counter spells that caused him to lose the game, so. Chris's draw is a copy of Supreme Verdict, which looks a little bit strange to have in his deck after sideboard. Though it is possible that's just in there as a blue card to remove the Force of Will. It's not the best use of the card, obviously.
Well, he's got 4 copies of Swords to Plowshares that he needs to cut, and the 2 copies of Spell Snare don't have very many targets, and he doesn't have a lot of cards to sideboard in, so I guess a blue card is the best thing you can do.
Here's a Brainstorm. See to the side, not a Force of Will, and a Thopter found around the draws, and, well, those are not all that impressive.
Now, it's important to know that Chris's counterspells are not actually turned off by Defense Grid. He can pass with 3 mana up, but that's a very challenging game to play over the long term.
We'll pass it on back. Or going Wehrmeyer's way. There's an Ancient Tomb. You can see Zach's hand. If he can just make it with a little bit more mana. The Force Will in his hand isn't great, though he can pay through Defense Grid now since he has all this mana, but he's 1 land away from Dream Halls, and that's really where he wants to be.
Yep. I mean, he's got a really good setup here. And Defense Grid protects him from a lot of the responses that Chris might have.
Omniscience, the other card here in Zach's hand, so though he won't be able to go off, given the cards that are in his hand currently, you know, if he draws a land, he can play Dream Halls, cheat Omniscience into play, and then we'll see where things go from there. That might just be good enough to get the job done.
Maybe, though it is a bit of a risk to just put Dream Halls into play and pass the turn against a deck like Chris's that could, you know, maybe has a Vindicate in it. He actually has a Detention Sphere in his sideboard he could have very easily have brought in. So a naked Dream Halls is, maybe that's where Zach's hand takes him and he hopes it's good enough, but there's no guarantee.
This is an Enlightened Tutor. That's going to resolve. So we'll see what Chris is going to dig up here. And as Enlightened Tutor does have quite a few targets for him. Seal of Cleansing among the options. We're kicking it old school.
Yep, Seal of Cleansing is not shabby here.
Could search up a Baleful Strix. Athersworn Canoness.
You get the card back.
You do. You really do.
House money.
That's basically free.
So it's one of my favorite things is Shireless Agent and Baleful Strix. It's like, look at all this free stuff I found. Didn't cost me anything. Got 2/2, a 1/1 flyer, a card back.
Seal of Cleansing going to go on top of the deck.
So now Chris does have the opportunity here to brainstorm. Hope that he finds white mana. He already knows the Seal of Cleansing's there. And then he can Seal of Cleansing the Defense Grid, and now his Force of Will is turned back on.
Yep.
And I think the mission may have been accomplished.
It's like Dig Through Time is one of the cards that's going to go back here.
It looks like he has 2 in hand, so you can safely get rid of one of them.
Yeah. Supreme Verdict seems like it can maybe go back too.
Probably pretty safe.
Yeah.
Come up to the stage, sign up, and start right away.
Looks like he's going to send back Dr. Finder and Dig, though he's going to think about it. His brainstorming is always quite difficult. The big plan here is to make sure that Force of Will actually does something this game. I'm not sure if Chris has played a land yet this turn. As here's a Ponder. Looked like he did. So Zach's going to take a look at a couple of cards. Of course, the reason Chris is casting all those spells on his turn is because Defense Grid's in play.
Yeah, you can't wait.
A lot of the time you think of Defense Grid only affecting counter spells, and counter spells costing more, but it's instants, so. He's got to play Enlightened Tutor on his own main phase, so it'll cost 1 mana as opposed to 4, which is a big difference.
And the fact that Zach is thinking about this at all is a good sign for Chris, because if Zach had the kill, he could just snap it off here pretty comfortably, you know? Defense Grid means that it would take some really bizarre sequence for Chris to be able to interact.
Yeah, not a ton to think about there. If he had found a show and tell or something, just rock and roll. Scalding Tarn on the land, pass the turn back, Andersen will draw. Tar Pit was the land. I thought it was a Delta, but it's actually a creeping Tar Pit. And now there is Seal of Cleansing.
Creeping Tar Pit, an interesting choice in Chris's deck. You typically see it in, Esper Stoneblade lists, decks that really care about attacking planeswalkers and such. His deck with the Thopter package feels like not where you would typically see this card.
A Force of Will is going to go after the Seal of Cleansing. Zach's going to have to pay 3 mana and 2 life, thanks to Ancient Tomb. Chris looks like he may have a response here, however. So this should be interesting. There's a Thought Scour. Going to get a little info first. Dig Through Time. Caracas going to go to the bin. Sword of the Meat going to go to the hand. Here's a Force of Will. Removing a blue card. Chris feeling it is very important to have Seal of Cleansing in play. And it's hard to argue, really.
Well, if he doesn't Force a Will back, it means he can't Force a Will on Zach's turn. And the Seal of Cleansing may be disruptive towards Zach's combo, And in the event that Zach doesn't have the combo, then Chris has the opportunity to seal cleansing the defense grid in the event that Chris draws a counterspell. So even though it looks a little weird for him to push through a seal cleansing and just pass there, he doesn't really have another option.
Well, Zach's going to sacrifice his fetch land. Dig himself out an island. Wants to make sure it's an unhinged one. They are the prettiest ones, of course.
Eh.
I didn't solicit your opinion. They're the prettiest ones.
Eh. I prefer the islands from the alpha/beta expansion.
We're not all just
classic.
all made of money, man.
I think they're about the same price. If anything, those lands are more expensive.
We're not all made out of money. Here's your dream halls. Defense grid is in the way. And Chris can't really have much of a response here. But now the big question is, all right, what do I do here with this sealed cleansing? How do I use it? Zach is going to remove. Oh, boy. Oh, baby. All right, this is getting interesting. So Chris is going to cold the defense grid and then remove Snapcaster Mage. Or excuse me, Snapcaster Mage to cast Dig through time.
Because Dream Halls is symmetrical.
Yep.
Both players are affected.
And now he casts Dig through time, and he's found Force of Will plus blue card, which allows him to counter Enter the Infinite.
It's not just countering it, it leaves Zach with nothing.
Yes.
You know? He gets everything this way.
He made his move. It works out. Interesting. Very nice play there by Chris. He'll take a draw step here. Only card he has is Sword of the Meek. Surgical Extraction, the draw step. Oh, we're cooking with gas now, aren't we?
Oh, wow.
Yep. Let's see what he's going to go after for. He's going to go with Enter the Infinite. Yeah, no, you can't win it. Wow. What a very large change in events there. And Chris Andersen's going to win this game and this match here over Zach Wehrmeyer. 2-0. Thopter Foundry will take care of Omnitel. And what a dynamic shift. I'd be smiling too if I were Chris.
Awesome. I mean, that was he had definitely some different paths there to play a little bit more conservatively. But win for broke left Zach with nothing. And then the surgical extraction off the top meant Zach could no longer win the game.
It's interesting because some people, when you play in Dream Halls, you think of Dream Halls of just part of the kill in Omnitel. And if you haven't been playing Magic that long or Legacy that much, and Omnitel's not a deck you see a ton, you might forget that Dream Halls is actually something that works for both players.
That's the type of game where if you don't play a lot of Legacy, if someone just handed you a deck and said, go play, I don't think the average player is able to win that game too that Chris just won. Requires a lot of understanding of how the various interactions work. And we're talking about a fringe deck with cards that you don't really see outside of that particular archetype. Shows a lot of knowledge of the format to know that he could maneuver it that way, get everything that Zach had in his hand, and then surgical extraction to wrap it up.
Pretty impressive W there for Chris Andersen, who is now 4-0 here in our Legacy Open from his home city of Indianapolis, Indiana. So congratulations to him. It's been a heck of a 2015 for him, man. He came back in Columbus, made the top 8 there with the 4-color Soul deck, kind of put that deck on the map, won a PTQ with it. Now he's off to a great start here. I think we might be seeing more of him on the Open Series this year.
And we really saw very little of him the 2 years previous, I would say. He would sporadically show up to some Opens, but was not playing Magic in any real full-time respect, but he is clearly back and has been playing very well thus far.
Yeah, I'm still a little surprised not to see him playing Elves this particular weekend. That was a little bit shocking to me just because Elves does seem like it's a pretty well-positioned deck, but other than that, I mean, this Thopter Foundry deck does look pretty good.
Got a lot of play to it and clearly has caught some people off guard so far. When we had his matchup against Burn, for example, his opponent did not appear to know all the little layerings and all the different interactions that Chris had going on there.
I know that Jerry's been working on Thopter Foundry decks, as have many other players, so I wouldn't be surprised to see this combo maybe show back on the map.
No, I think it's